real stories of werewolves, of dogmen from history, from your emails, illustrated and animated with the democratizing magic of machine learning AI. Welcome to Scary Stories.
Men Who Fight Dogman, a collection of short anecdotes about human beings who actually fought with dogmen and werewolves. Beginning with Road Rage Dogman. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I got a story about a dogman that happened east of Philadelphia, whether you believe me or not, east of Pennsylvania, which is a state known for sightings of this cryptid, but in New Jersey, which as far as I know is not associated with cryptids other than the Jersey Devil, plus maybe some ghosts and aliens and that sort of thing. I admit Newark can be scary, but not in a Halloween-y way too much. But there was at least one dogman in the Garden State on at least one night, because I seen it with my own two baby blues. So this was back before 9/11 when my wife was still with us, God rest her soul. She's not in this story, but I remember thinking about her a lot when it happened. See, it didn't start off as a monster sighting or anything like that. It started off with me driving through the Wharton State Forest on Trenton Road, bringing a valise with me that I was to deliver to the husband of my wife's cousin. I don't know what was in it. I don't ask dumb questions. It was pretty late at night, but it was incredibly hot. I had been wearing a wife beater, but I took even that off. My AC was busted in the car, but I had the windows rolled down. You would think that the breeze would cool me down, but it did not. So suddenly there was this guy driving toward me. I could see him coming from a ways off. Trenton Road is Route 206. It's a 2-lane road, and we had plenty of room to pass each other. But then, bam, at the last second, this guy turns his wheel sharply, and I'm about to get into a head-on collision. Whammo, we hit, but I turned to the side a bit at the last second, and my car ricocheted to the side. It sounded like my bumper got smashed, and in fact it did, on the front driver's side, but the rest of the damage to me was cosmetic. When I got out to see if the other driver was alright, I found his entire front end smashed in, and his engine smoking this white smoke like it was announcing a new pope or something. The guy is fine though, and he comes over to me all angry, screaming that it was my fault. While he's screaming, I'm too amazed to say anything because this guy, he looks like he could be my cousin, you know? He's wearing the same kind of wife beater that I took off and left in the car. He's attractively overweight. He's handsomely balding and short. I mean, he really could have been my brother. That was why I was thinking about my late wife, God rest her soul. If she had met this loser, she might have fallen in love. He looked so much like me that he had to be her type, right? So anyway, I told the guy that he turned into my lane, so obviously it couldn't be my fault that this happened. That caused him to lose it even worse. He tore his undershirt off and threw it on the ground in fury. His face was so red that I couldn't tell if he was going to tackle me or have an attack himself. And then, all of a sudden, one of those only in New Jersey moments happened. This freaking monster burst out of the woods, right? And it turned and ran over toward us. So what do I mean when I say monster? Well, it was kind of like a Bigfoot from the Leonard Nimoy documentaries, and you know, Rod Serling and whatnot. But this thing's head looked more like a dog's head, right? Sometimes I tell this story, especially back in the older days, and people would say, oh, a Bigfoot with a black nose and ears up on top? Honey, that's called a bear. But this wasn't any bear. Bears don't run over on their hind legs only, like this dog-faced Sasquatch did. Sometimes people ask me about the thing's legs. Did it have dog legs or squatch legs? Dog feet or big feet? Honestly, that wasn't a subject I had too much interest in at that particular moment, if you can believe it. There was a guy bigger than me and this nutjob that ran into me put together, and he seemed to be angrily heading in our direction. I wasn't studying his legs. I warned the other driver, but he just wanted to keep screaming at me. Before I knew it, I had backed away and was watching as this big old dogman or werewolf or whatever you would prefer to think it was, descended onto this other handsome guy over there on Trenton Road that night. The monster and the man began to have a sort of a fist fight, if you can call the Dogman's paws fists. They stood there trading blows and shoves and pushes, both animals up on their hind legs, closely resembling the way humans walk. To me, though, neither one of them seemed truly human. Not even that handsome one with the mustache just like mine. To me, this was a fight between two ancient monsters of some sort, as silly as that sounds. People always ask me who won the fight. Well, I did. While the two of them messed each other up, I snuck back to my vehicle, and thanks to the Virgin Mother's grace, it started on my first try. I had a mystery release to deliver, and that seemed more important to me than trading driver's licenses with the idiot who was now engaging in a fist fight with a freaking dogman, or whatever it was. A werewolf, maybe. The fact that when I last saw him in my rearview mirror, that human was still standing in his fight against the monster, makes me wonder if he was in fact human at all. Maybe the creepy way he seemed to be my wife's type wasn't just a coincidence. Maybe that was just some sort of paranormal effect. Maybe that guy was just as much a monster as the dogman. Or maybe it was just a very hot day and he was in an epically bad mood. It might have just been as simple as that. Maybe it was just his extreme furious anger that kept that handsome man alive as he fought against the road rage dogman. Story number 2. Dogman street fight in the alleyway. Dear Scary Stories NYC. Yo, I know you think Dogman is some kind of natural animal, but I seen one time. Actually, I seen one a few times, but I never seen it out in nature like Tarzan. I seen it in a dirty alley like a sewer rat. In my opinion, it's more likely that thing was created by a mad scientist or an evil wizard than that it could have been a natural thing. There was no way God wanted that animal walking the face of this world. And that means it's not here with God's blessing. Now, in the old days in Detroit, we had an underground fight scene. It moved out of the city after it got too dangerous for the fighters to even want to be in that area anymore. But this story goes back to before Detroit got as scary as it is now. Back then, the worst thing we had to look out for was a 7-foot-tall carnivorous wolfman with long fangs that walked up on its back legs like a giant Rory Calhoun. So this was in some ways like Fight Club in the movie of the same name, but in most other ways it was dissimilar. For instance, this wasn't all happening in the mind of some Hollywood actor. This was all as real as a politician's lie. And just as smelly, too. We had this alley behind, well, I'd better not say exactly what it was behind, but you would be surprised, even though important business was going on right nearby. The way this alley was built and situated, most of the noise we generated sort of stayed right there with us. So it was a pretty good place to have a secret boxing match, or as in this case, a good place to have a no-rules fight to the finish. They had different rules with different fights, but I remember that with the main bouts, it wasn't over until someone was unconscious, or if someone had given up and forfeited. And the Dogman's fights were always the main attraction every single time. If you got into that alley to fight the Detroit Dogman, armed only with your taped-up knuckles against his teeth and claws, you were not looking to get a TKO. You were basically looking to survive. Lasting 5 rounds while still remaining conscious and alive would achieve a draw, which paid almost half of what a win would pay. I say would, because I can't recall anyone ever doing either. Winning against the Dogman, or even lasting 5 rounds while remaining conscious. Now this was the 1970s, and folks were mostly skinnier than now, but still I seen some strong men go down in defeat to that wolfman that they had chained up back there. Some guys I know I couldn't defeat if I had to fight them. One night there was this guy who had come to town looking to fight the Dogman. This was a big white guy, probably in his 30s I'd guess, but muscular. Like super muscular. Like double steroids muscular. I had never seen anyone that muscular back then, although I have since. This guy was wilder looking than even a Mr. Universe would have looked back in those days. Or at least that's the way I remember him. That was the only guy who I thought might be a match for the Dogman. The two of them fought for 3 rounds, and I was feeling like the Muscle Man was going to win it, in the name of humanity. Before the end of the 4th round, though, the Dogman had this guy on the ground on his belly, with one leg being bent back too far, until he gave up and cried uncle. I still think that on the right night, with the right breaks, that guy might have been able to take the Wolfman, but nobody else I saw even came close. It wasn't a question of whether the Dogman would win, but how long it would take to get the job done. I know that one of the guys from back in those days later went into dogfighting. You know, the more traditional dogfighting, but by the middle of the 80s, I never saw any more werewolf or Bigfoot bouts, at least not out of doors in the alley. And I'm not sure those were really actually Bigfoot. They just seemed like tall, hairy guys to me. The werewolf one had claws and fangs, though. That was a legit cryptid of one sort or another. Sometimes I couldn't even bet on him, because everybody knew he was gonna be the winner. Nobody would even take my bet. My grandson told me I should include a paragraph here describing the creature. Well, it had longish hair all over, sort of a long, wavy, reddish blonde kind of a hair. Like an Irish setter, I'd guess, except it didn't have those long hanging ears like an Irish setter. This guy had ears up on top of his head, more like what you would see on a wolf, except I've never seen an orangey brown long-furred wolf before. Maybe you have. This creature was up on its back legs and acting like he thought he was a man. He even sat on a stool like a man in between rounds. But he panted like a dog. He was taller than any of the other fighters, maybe even over 7 feet tall. I don't recall anything about his feet, to the great annoyance of my grandson. He says you can tell what kind of a creature it is, based on what its feet look like. He learned that on YouTube, so it must be true. I don't really know if I remember too much more about these monster fights. They were pretty rare. Mainly this was a human-on-human kind of fight club, and most of my memories are of those sort of bouts, not the ones you'd be interested in. So I guess that's all I can really tell you about. Dogman street fight in the alleyway. Story number 3. I fought Dogman over my Halloween candy. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I had a Dogman experience on Halloween one time when I was a teenager. To me, this seems to indicate that the Dogman is not a natural creature, but must in some way be supernatural. Halloween is supposed to be the time when the veil is thin between different worlds or realities. I don't think it's a coincidence that this is the night when I had my Dogman experience. In fact, maybe it was even a werewolf experience. During that part of my teenage years, I hung with a very few dorky individuals and didn't have many other friends or acquaintances. Kids at school called me weird to my face, but I called them boring to theirs. Although I loved the sleepy, peaceful town I grew up in, most of my peers were kind of idiots. My brother is now raising his family right there in that same house, so I don't want to out him or the location. In spite of the fact that we both got beat up and bullied repeatedly as we grew up, we both think of that as a kind of a magical place. Usually the magic is the golly gee kind, like when you get to see another stunning sunrise or sunset. But sometimes it's the goosebumps and shivers kind of magic when you realize that you're being followed by the Dogman. So that year my plans for Halloween were to go to my friend Shepley's place to watch a marathon of obscure Halloween or monster-related spooky movies on VHS. His parents were away on an ocean cruise, so we could go full teenager and have all the frozen pizza we wanted as we watched these movies. Before I left home to walk over, my friends called me and gave me a path to walk to their place that they said would provide a lot of trick-or-treat candy. I was kind of shy, plus I think I was 16 or 17 years old, so I felt like I was too old to be trick-or-treating. My buddies put their foot down and said I needed to bring a bag of Halloween candy as the admission price for the free pizza and movies, so I had no choice. I had no available costume, so I put a sheet over my head and I said I was a ghost. I think I stopped at 5 or 6 places along the way, and my friends were correct that these houses were very generous in terms of trick-or-treat candy. I was suffocating under that sheet, though, so I pulled it off, rolled it up, and tied it around my waist. Then I started sampling some of my candy as I walked to Shepley's. I kept thinking I was hearing a strange sound in the night. Sometimes it was to my left, other times to my right. It seemed to come from dark areas, and I couldn't see what was making that sound. I thought it was some kind of rubber squishy toy at first. It was kind of a squeaky sound, but also sounded a lot like a voice. When I heard the sound in conjunction with a twig snap from right behind me, I turned my head slowly, and I saw something that I hope to never see again. I found myself looking at a really big, tall, freaking monster dogman wolfman guy. And he was behind me, looking over my shoulder and into my bag of candy. I know I wasn't a little kid, and I know I should have been too old for this kind of a reaction. But the thought of that wolfman stealing my candy before I got to Shepley's Halloween party felt truly horrible to me. Looking back on it, the idea that I might have been finished off completely by the beast pops up in my mind as something possibly worse than the idea of losing some candy. But seriously, what do I know now in 2024? Now I'm just an old man. Back then, I was a teenager, the wisest of all God's creatures. So I ran from the monster, and when it grabbed in my candy bag, I turned and I kicked at its clawed hand. I wasn't even wearing boots. I think I had Pro Keds on, or possibly Converse All-Stars. Those are cloth sneakers with rubber bottoms. They are not made for fighting the Dogman. They are not created for defending bags of candy. What I did was foolish, so don't try this at home, kids. At one point, we each had hold of the bag, which was a tote bag my mom gave me from the local PBS station. It was half filled with hard candies and chocolates. I pulled and he pulled, and I could hear the cloth bag tearing or ripping a little more with each tug. Some people walked by on the sidewalk in costume, and they must have thought we were putting on some kind of a staged Halloween show on the lawn. One trick-or-treater dressed as Scotty from Star Trek shouted out at me in a bad Scottish brogue, "For the love of God, man, give the dog some candy!" It got a big laugh from his friends, and the dogman stopped pulling on the bag to turn and stare at the laughing, costumed people. Poor monster seemed confused as to what he was looking at. I took that moment to pull out some sample-sized chocolate bars and tossed them on the ground in front of the wolfman as his Halloween treat. Then when he let go of the bag, I turned and bolted for Shepley's. Sure enough, the dogman took the bait and let me go. It was a win-win scenario, if ever there was one. When I got there, the other guys didn't believe me that I saw a werewolf on the way over, and that he tried to steal my candy. At least, not at first. They humored me and we watched some werewolf movies, though. I kept telling them what the movies got right or wrong compared to what I had seen. And after about 3 movies of this, the guys started to believe that I wasn't making up that story. We were out of werewolf movies to watch by then, but we all imagined that the creature I saw might be right outside. Right then. I mean, it happened less than a 10-minute walk from that house. The idea that something like that could be walking around right then, in our super normal little town, completely blew our minds. And then by luck, we found a werewolf movie late night double feature just starting on TV. And I guess that's the end of my story about how I fought Dogman over my Halloween candy. Whether you're wired up on coffee or in a sleepy drift, you need to thank our EP, her name's Sabrina Midkiff. Please join me in thanking Sabrina Midkiff, who made this episode possible, with a kind donation made using the thanks button located hopefully under each of our videos on YouTube. Thank you so much, Sabrina. You really are helping keep the channel alive. There are other ways you can help us stay afloat, and here to tell you all about them, and the perks you can get in return, is our international TV spokesmongrel, Henry Lee Dogman. Hank. Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button. Or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after, I think, 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.